Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Tevis-Finn, and welcome back to Reconstruction. We're on part 3. So I'm opening with a political cartoon I'd like you to look at, and we'll talk about in your groups. Especially, I want you guys to practice point of view, so please try to figure out the point of view of this one. And so let's talk about our Reconstruction president, Ulysses S. Grant. His first term, you guys can note that he was a Civil War hero, but lacked political experience. He did some good things for our economy, so under strengthen the economy, you want to put down that he continued policies that were used during the Civil War. So one thing he did was repay our debt in gold, not paper, so that helped with inflation. He increased funding to the railroads, which definitely helped our economy, and he kept tariffs high to boost American business. One thing that was controversial is he kept taxes on alcohol and tobacco. These were called sin taxes because they're on alcohol and tobacco. These sin taxes, guys, were used to help pay for the war, and so Grant keeps those in place. And so there are disagreements. For the Democratic Party begins to argue that the Republicans are favoring the wealthy. They are saying that the wealthy had bought war bonds. And I want you guys to define what a war bond is. I gave you a picture of it back here on this side. What they are promissory notes or loans. And what it would do is the government would repay the note with interest after the war. So when people bought these during the war, it helped pay, for the Union Army. And so really the wealthy are making more money even now after the war because they're getting these bonds paid back to them. Democrats also said the Republicans targeted the poor, who did pay more taxes. So within the Republican Party, a group emerged that agreed with the Democrats, and they were called the Liberal Republicans. They even tried to prevent Grant's renomination. So that's pretty huge, the president of your own party you're trying to get rid of. So they nominated their own candidate, fill out his name, Horace Greeley. He's pictured here. Guys, put down he was a famous New York newspaper editor. He's a former abolitionist. Though he is moderate in some of his views, he thought the main goal for Reconstruction was to restore relations with the South. So what do you think he's in favor of? Here's the Confederate flag to kind of remind you. So what do they promise, guys? Fill in. They promise to pardon all former Confederates and remove Union troops from the South. So my question is, why are Republicans promising this? This is what their party's supposedly against. But I believe it's to try to get Southern support. And the last kind of bullet there, guys, down there, is it did work because the Democrats did join Greeley to unite against Grant. However, it did fail because Grant was too popular. Grant's popularity, though, does start to decline. I'm on number 3, guys, his second term. Put down that political scandals really hurt his reputation. His own Secretary of War was caught accepting bribes from army posts in the West, so making money off the merchants. The big one was the whiskey ring, which I have a political cartoon there. So you guys want to put down there that government officials conspired with distillers, and they cheated the federal government out of millions of dollars by falsifying tax reports. So things are slowly crumbling for the Grant administration. And what really kind of seals his fate is this economic chaos known as the Panic of 1873. So it's kind of a chain reaction, and I want you to understand the economics of it because we'll see this again in the 20th century. So it begins with just bad railroad investments, right? And so it leads to one bank closing, so one bankruptcy. And what happens is that produces a wave of fear. So the next chain is a wave of fear spreads, leading to more banks closing. The stock market price is dropping and unemployment rising. And so what happens, guys, is by midterm elections, which you guys should know because you're going to be voting soon, a midterm election is when the party gets a measure of how well they're doing. Republicans are not doing well. So what happens, guys, fill in. The Democrats won back some seats in the Senate, which is big, but more importantly, they got control of the House of Representatives. Alright, and I'm big on political cartoons, so this one over here on the right we're also going to talk about in your groups, but for you guys right now on your own, please pay attention to the point of view and see if you can analyze that. Alright guys, so I'm now on the next page, which is I call ups and downs. We'll see the Republicans, what they're doing in the South. We'll learn about African American communities, and we will see the rise of the KKK. So I'm on number 5, and I want you guys to put down for that first line that by late 1870, all former Confederate states had rejoined, and they rejoined under the Radical Republican plan. So we now have a united country. And what we see happen is many Northerners moved to the South, even taking positions in new state governments. Southerners referred to them as carpetbaggers because, as you can see, some arrived with these huge suitcases. Many viewed them as intruders, trying to take advantage. Kind of note the caricature here. He doesn't look very trustworthy. Looks like he's going to fill his carpet bag with stuff from the South. Many had other reasons, though, to move to the South, and there were job opportunities. So there were Northern teachers, for example. So that's a good thing, right? Coming down to teach the freed slaves. Southerners also despised white Southerners who worked with Republicans. They called these people scalawags, and that might be one of my favorite words. It's an old Scotch-Irish term, and I do have Scotch-Irish in my background. So guys, you should note what a scalawag is. It's a worthless farm animal, a weak, underfed farm animal. And so this is how they viewed, their fellow countrymen. There are mixed reasons for this group as well. Many were small farmers who were against the wealthy planters. Some even were businessmen who benefited from Republican reforms. So, you have carpetbaggers and scalawags. Here's some good news. I always like good news. So African Americans do, rise in politics. And so fill in the first thing for number 6 is the 15th Amendment allowed freedmen to take part in governing the South. So at first, the leaders were those who had already been educated before the war, such as ministers. Many had lived in the North and even fought for the Union Army. The Republican Party supported them and were able to draw in former slaves into politics. Next line, guys, former slaves now even became legislators, administrators. Next is hundreds served as delegates. You guys should know delegates, remember, helped form state governments. They also won elections to local offices like mayor and police chief. And this is huge. 14 were elected to the House of Representatives, and 2 were elected to Senate. All right, guys, I'm on number 7. And so, Southerners begin to certainly look down on the Republican Party, even calling it the Black Republican Party. So they claim that the Black Republican Party ruled the South. This was, an exaggeration, but it did reflect deep resentment. Many white Southerners did vote for the Republican Party because, again, reforms had helped them, and some also, like I said before, resented the wealthy that had already joined the Democratic Party. So a number of reforms were started. They repealed many of the black codes. They established state hospitals for orphans and the mentally ill. Here's one up here in South Carolina. They rebuilt bridges and railroads and roads. And they established a system for public schools. Many state governments, guys, had to borrow money to get these programs going, and so they imposed high property taxes. Nobody, guys, likes taxes. This led to many property owners unable to pay these taxes, and they lost their land. There was also political corruption, and government officials were accepting bribes. This, guys, is called graft, or gaining money illegally through politics. It definitely happened on both sides, but it gave the Democrats another issue for them to regain power in the South. Please look at this political cartoon carefully and note how blacks are being characterized, and even the whites that are supporting the blacks are being characterized. And again, on another positive note, religion, guys, had long played a central role in the lives of African Americans. So now that they're free, I'm on number 8, they began building their own churches. So these churches, guys, served as centers for their communities. They housed schools, social events, political meetings, even in rural areas, picnics and parties. In many communities, churches even acted as unofficial courts, promoting social values, settling disputes, and even disciplining bad behavior. So they really tried to take care of each other. Education is a huge initiative during the Reconstruction era, and by 1870, guys, the Freedmen's Bureau had built 4,000 schools and hired 9,000 teachers. By 1876, about 40% of African American children were enrolled. African American colleges and universities were established, and the most famous, I want you guys to know, was Howard University. Howard is the last name, guys, named after General Oliver Howard. He was the founder of the Freedmen's Bureau. It also established the first law school for African Americans. And just a side note, it's in Washington, D.C., and that's pretty close to where I went to grad school, so I know where it is. And for women, in 1881, Spelman College was founded, which is the first college for African American women. And I want you guys to note that our First Lady also attended Spelman and is just shown there speaking. So that's kind of a cool thing to know. Next, I want you guys to know that Tuskegee Institute started in Alabama. The first teacher, guys, is pictured here. He's an amazing figure. His name is Booker T. Washington. He becomes a very important African American leader. And here's a picture of a classroom. I hate to leave you on a bad note, but we have to finish up with the retaliation. So number 10, guys, the Ku Klux Klan forms. African Americans faced intense resentment from white Southerners. So instead of striking openly, some Southerners formed secret societies. The largest group was the KKK, and it started in Tennessee by former Confederate soldiers. Their leader, I want you to put down, is Nathan Bedford Forrest, pictured there on the left. So guys, its goal was to drive out carpetbaggers, right, they were anti-North, and intimidate African American voters to regain control of the South for the Democratic Party. They disguised their identities, I'm sure you guys know, but they did wear the costumes, the hoods. They met at night mostly, and what they would do is they would break up Republican meetings, they would drive out Freedmen's Bureau officials from their positions, and they would burn homes and schools and churches in the African American community. So guys, these activities outraged President Grant and the Republican Congress. They passed enforcement acts to fight back. One was actually known as the KKK Act, and it outlawed the Klan's activities. More than 3,000 Klan members were arrested, yet there was bias, for Southern juries only convicted about 600, and fewer served time. Here's the last political cartoon that I want you guys to look at and we'll talk about in our groups. This is Mrs. Tevis-Finn signing off. I'll see you guys tomorrow.